Greetings and welcome to this episode of the Heal and Restore podcast with your host, Randy, and the hostess with the mostest, my beautiful wife here, Cathy.
Are you holding your breath in there, honey?
I had a burp that was trying to escape, so I was trying to swallow the burp so it wouldn't come out.
Well, that just makes more air, so you should probably...
I got enough hot air as it is,
That's
right?
true. That is true. So, welcome. Hi, everybody.
Well, we're back for another wonderful episode of the Heal and Restore podcast.
Yeah, I'm excited.
And we're going to continue on relationship stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We had a great 3 or 4 runs subjects, right?
Yeah, we've had some good subjects.
This is a really good subject. So today we're going to continue that with reigniting intimacy, more than just sex.
Yeah,
and that's a lesson Cathy and I have learned.
Yeah, definitely.
We've learned it, and actually just since I got in recovery in the last 20 years, and more so probably in the last 10.
Yeah, definitely. Right. And, it's interesting because, we work with couples, we work with individuals, but a lot of times when people hear the word intimacy, the first place they go is to the sex word.
Yep.
And, that's not what intimacy is really about. That's a byproduct of true intimacy.
But it's not their fault because how many people were really taught the real meaning of intimacy?
Right.
I mean,
so we're going to jump into that.
We're
going to talk about, how intimacy can be challenging, but how we can also rekindle the connection of what true intimacy looks like.
And it is possible.
Yeah.
And somewhere along the podcast you hear how I had to do it with my wife.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was very legitimate.
Yeah. So first thing we want to do is we want to define what true intimacy really means. There's intimacy that is emotional, physical, spiritual, and recreational.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah.
So what does intimacy truly mean? It's not just about that physical closeness that we talked about. No. So it's about being seen, feeling safe, and connected at so many different levels. Right. So healthy intimacy, it's just the foundation of a thriving relationship.
That's exactly what it is.
And it comes in a lot of different forms like we talked about.
Right, exactly.
So what's the first form of intimacy that comes to mind for you?
I think the first and most important is emotional intimacy.
Yeah.
And that's the ability to share your inner world, your thoughts, your fears, your dreams, and your struggles without fear, this is the key, of judgment. Mm-hmm. It's about being vulnerable, being known, and feeling emotionally safe. And that is the key right there, that Cathy and I have really worked on. I've worked on it a lot with my wife because I am the one that's supposed to be able to protect her in so many different areas. And I can tell you anything and know you'll listen and still love me.
Yeah, that's a form of emotional intimacy.
And it's weird when I'm just now thinking about that. Who's the first person I ever told about being abused?
Yeah, that was me.
And I barely was just getting to know Cathy, but something in me just, it was God is what it was.
Yeah.
I just told her everything that happened to me.
That's truly a form. I've never really thought of that. That's a true form of emotional intimacy.
And emotional vulnerability. Because
being
it's like,
safe, yeah.
I figured if I'm going to make this relationship work, I can't be taking any secrets into this marriage. And that was a huge secret, and that was a big reason why I ended up in divorce in our first marriage.
In your first marriage.
In my
not
first
my,
marriage.
Not our marriage.
In my first marriage. Because I carried that secret into that marriage.
Yeah. And then there's another form of intimacy, which is, for most people, it seems to be the obvious, and that's the physical intimacy. Right. And that includes both the sexual and the non-sexual touch.
Right.
And that expresses love, it expresses desire, and it expresses affection. So, things like holding hands, hugging, cuddling, or simply just sitting close to each other, kind of like we are right now. They all build a connection through the body. So I would say that if you feel close to me, not just sexually, but in a simple everyday moments, that is what physical intimacy can look like.
And that's something that throughout our marriage, almost 42 years now, that Cathy and I have both done. Even when the times were dark, right, there was always that part of we enjoyed doing things with each other, even though there was some resentments, mostly on her part at one point, and rightfully so, but still, us just being together, sitting on a beach or just walking, in a mall, whatever, we always enjoyed doing that together.
Yeah.
Right. And as of late, over the last several years, couple of years, whatever it's been, we're even more so than that.
Yeah.
You know, it's like last night we went out to dinner and walking back to the car, and I told Cathy, man, I just really enjoy your presence in my life. I love being next to you. I love you, the way we do things together. And, you know, I always, and she loves it. I'm not shy about patting her on the
No,
butt
you're not.
and telling her.
You even did that on our wedding day in front of my uncle, who looked appalled.
Right. And I've even done it in church.
Yeah, you have.
I mean, you know, it's nothing sexual.
No.
Right? It's just it's a little love pat.
It's
you
that
know?
physical intimacy. So
non-sexual.
Non-sexual. Exactly. So then the next category that we talk about on intimacy is spiritual intimacy. Yes. So Randy, you're the spiritual leader in our house.
Well,
although we do spiritually lead with each other, side by side.
I think that's critical.
Yeah.
I mean,
so talk about the spiritual intimacy though and how it's developed.
So I'm gonna have to throw scripture, right? Especially for us men. Ephesians 5:25. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church, and Christ died for the church.
Perfect.
So what does that mean? Well, first of all, if I want Cathy to go back and up to Ephesians 5:22, wives submit unto your husbands as unto Christ. If I want her to do that, and submit doesn't mean she does everything I say, I'm her boss.
Right.
That's not what that means. It means we're walking side by side. If I want her to do that, I have to love her as Christ loved the church.
Right.
Right? And I have also got to die to myself on certain days.
Right.
Right? So that's what that means.
Yeah.
If you with the spiritual part of it and a spiritual head of the house, right?
Yeah.
That's what it takes. Okay. So it might look like, you know, even praying together, which, you know, one of our faults is we don't do that a lot. We should do it more, and we know it. You know, it's having spiritual conversations that we do have a lot of, right? Or growing side by side in our walk with God, right? There's a diagram we use, and it's like a pyramid. And at the bottom two corners of the pyramid is you and your spouse, and at the top is God. And the closer you get to God together as a team, the closer you become to each other. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's growing, you know, walking side by side. It's it could be you're hiking, cooking, right? Yeah. Dancing in the kitchen. I've done it. I've surprised her a couple of times.
You've jumped ahead though to recreational intimacy.
Oh, I did.
I
get all excited, right?
You get excited,
So growing side by side with the walk with God, and it's like we invite God into our relationship and grow stronger because of it.
Yeah. With God at the center, you can't go wrong.
No,
you can't go wrong. And then to jump ahead here to the recreational intimacy. This is my favorite part. I think you've come a long way in your recreational intimacy with us in our relationship. But the joy of doing things together. I mean, that's the key. The laughing, the playing, the exploring. You're trying to tickle me right now, relaxing. And in fact, this morning you scared me when I walked into the room.
Just a little one, nothing major.
No, but it scared me.
Right.
So, you know, whether we're out hiking or whether we're cooking or dancing, like you said, dancing in the kitchen, that type of intimacy, it creates bonds. And it creates bond through fun and shared experiences. And I love that.
Well, it's like last night. I love what you did last night. I'm laying in bed just kind of relaxing. My neck was hurting. Cathy come in, laid down next to me, and then she rolled over with her back on top of me, right?
But she just kept rolling.
And she kept rolling, and she was being goofy, and I loved it.
Yeah.
I absolutely loved that. That's a form of, I felt close to her. I knew, and here's the big key to this. I knew she felt safe with me.
Right.
That's the only way she would have done that.
Yeah.
If she didn't feel safe doing that with me,
that's true.
She wouldn't have done it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So those are signs that she feels safe and comfortable doing those kind of things.
Yeah, absolutely. So true intimacy, it's truly built when all four of these areas can be nurtured.
Yep.
So just to kind of recap on those areas, we're talking about emotional intimacy, we're talking physical intimacy, we're talking spiritual intimacy, and recreational intimacy. Right. And if just one of those areas is missing, the relationship can and will feel off balance.
Right.
But when they all grow together,
yeah,
couples will thrive.
Yeah,
so
that's exactly what happens.
Yeah.
And
so it's really important.
here's the personal story with me, right? Is that oftentimes I would go up behind Cathy and give her a hug and kiss her on the neck, right? And she got to the point to where I did that. She was going, "Oh, you give me the chills," and I go, and I knew I wasn't giving her the chills, right? I knew it for a fact, right? And I kept, "Why are you doing that? You give me the chills." And finally, when I asked her one time, I go, "Why are you doing that, Cathy?" She goes, and this is, now we're in recovery, but she goes, "In the past when you did that, all you wanted to do was go to bed with me."
Mm-hmm.
Right.
True.
And she was right.
Yeah.
I mean, that was
an old behavior.
That was an old behavior.
Yeah.
And again, my job is to validate how she felt. And I did that. And I said, "No, that's not it at all. I'm working on just being your husband. I like kissing your neck. I like rubbing your back." And it took a while, even after I said that.
Yeah, and we were, and like it says here, if any of these are out of order,
right,
you'll feel off balance. So I think at that time we were still working on a lot of these emotional, physical, spiritual, and recreational intimacy areas.
Yes, we were.
And so that's a perfect example of if any of these areas being off balance, that those types of things are going to still come up.
Right.
And so in the past, we were completely off balance when it came to that. Today, we are more in sync. There's times we might be a little off balance, but I think we recognize it sooner.
Yeah, we recognize it. I think when you go to the past again, was it our fault? No, because we weren't taught anything different.
No, and we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what happens when intimacy fades. Because in most relationships, intimacy is formed at the very beginning and things happen. So here's some common reasons, though, that intimacy can fade. And a lot of these were very common in our relationship. Resentments or unresolved conflict. We were building on some of that. Past trauma or body image.
Cathy's resentments towards me, and I'm going to say this truthfully and honestly, I feel, I created those in her because of my past trauma that I brought into the relationship, I've said this countless times. I had the affair. The only thing Cathy did wrong was love me unconditionally. And it was a form of unconscious self-sabotaging that I was unaware of.
Right, at the time, yeah.
So we have to be aware of our past traumas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So that's interesting that you said that, because resentment, unresolved conflicts, but you had the past trauma.
Right.
Or some people might even have body image struggles.
I struggled with that.
You did. Yeah, you did that for a while. And then the emotional disconnect and the unspoken needs.
Yeah, those are huge.
These are all things that we kind of experienced in our marriage. Not at the very beginning, but as time went on. So I don't think these are things that are always like red flags jumping out at you right away. It's over time these things started to develop.
So here's something in this one particular part of it, that unspoken needs. And Cathy and I have talked about this, when we do marriage counseling from now on. How many out there have really sat down before you got married? You're going out, you're having fun, and sat down and say, okay, we want to marry each other. We know that.
Yeah.
But before we do that, let's each of us sit down, what we expect out of ourselves and out of you in the marriage, and what are our needs in this marriage.
Yeah.
At a minimum, that's what you want to enter into the marriage with, so that you're both clear on all of these things, right? Now, are those needs and expectations going to change over time? Absolutely, they will.
Yeah.
But
you want them to. You want to grow.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's like maybe once a year you guys sit down and rehash those expectations and needs.
Yeah, update them. It's okay. It's okay if they change. We evolve as we mature and grow older, so our needs will as well.
Right, and because we've entered into a covenant with God when we set our vows, we're going to have to be willing to find ways to compromise and change. And grow. We have our changes. Cathy has the way she changes. I have the way I change. We have to compromise and learn each other's values throughout life, not just when we first get married.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So we're going to talk a little bit about the difference between physical closeness and emotional vulnerability. They definitely tie together.
Right.
So can you tell us a little bit about the physical closeness and emotional vulnerability?
So talking about the space between physical closeness and emotional vulnerability, because a lot of couples live right there in that space. A lot of them. They're stuck in the middle.
Absolutely.
Maybe they're still physically affectionate, which Cathy and I were a lot, hugging, holding hands, and even being sexually active. Cathy and I were that. But something really feels off.
Mm-hmm.
They're not emotionally open, and they're not really seen. Not physically, but they're not seen emotionally, right, and spiritually. So what's missing in that equation?
Yeah, no, that's really good. Right. So sometimes what's often missing is the relational safety and trust.
Yep.
And that was something that we worked on.
Yep.
That's the bridge. It's the bridge between the physical and the emotional. So without the safety, people will hold back. Yep. They'll just kind of withdraw. They don't want to be judged. They get shut down. They have their vulnerability thrown back at them later. I mean, that's happened.
Oh, yeah.
So they just stay surface level. And even in bed, it's just everything's like just surface level. Kind of keeping everything at an arm's reach. At
arm's reach. And, a lot of times one or both the spouses, it's a duty, so I'm going to go ahead and engage.
My responsibility as a wife.
Right. But I want to touch on one subject that you just said. Vulnerability thrown back at them later.
Yeah.
Man, you cannot do that to people.
Yeah.
That is probably the most damaging thing that one can do.
Right. No, that's true.
To your spouse.
That's true.
And even in 1 Corinthians 13, 4-8, I think it's 5, verse 5. Love keeps no records of past wrongs.
Absolutely.
Cathy, I'm going to say it again. You hear me say it all the time. 42 years of marriage. Not once has Cathy thrown anything in my face, nor have I thrown anything in her face. And that affair that I had 21 years ago now, Cathy has not once thrown it in my face.
Right, right. So, we talk about the relational safety and trust. So now what?
So that's where a lot of hurt begins, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And when that trust is broken, because physical intimacy without emotional connection can leave one or both partners feeling used or unseen.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
And part of that is, those expectations and needs. You talk about your sexual expectations and needs, which I hope will tie into the emotional intimacy, right? And the flip side, trying to open up emotionally without physical closeness can be disconnected, right?
Yeah.
But when you build trust, consistency, and non-demanding affection, it creates the safety for both kinds of intimacy to thrive.
That's so good. That's so good. Yeah.
So it's the one thing that, again, creates the safety. And I think, Cathy, correct me if I'm wrong, that's probably the most important part of this whole equation.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's in those everyday moments when we're checking in, or that, that gentle touch on the back, praying together, saying I'm here for you, I love you. That creates that safe space. And that's when your spouse becomes the person you run to and not the one you hide from.
Right.
And that's key. Is you want to create that space, that safe person in your life that you can go to.
Right. What happens when all this falls together, right, is that it's no longer sex. Mm-hmm. It's making love. And there is a huge difference, right?
Yeah.
One of the things I read one time, and I wish I could find it again, but when your wife allows you to make love to her, it's powerful because you're actually becoming one with her.
Right, exactly, yeah.
And it's the most intimate form of emotional intimacy that there
you can have,
Right. So for any couple listening, right, I want you to ask yourselves, what's one way I can help my partner feel safer emotionally this week? Okay? That one step might be the bridge you've been missing.
That's really good.
In other words, that one step that you can take might be the one that she's been looking for to bring the two of you together emotionally, and thus, and let me expand on this a little bit. Because you do it once, doesn't mean it's
all
got to
fixed.
change. No, it's that change that change with consistency over time.
Right. Absolutely.
That's what's going to make the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. So in order to get there, though, we have to have emotional intimacy first.
Yes.
So why is emotional safety the foundation for all other intimacies?
Why emotional safety is the foundation for all other intimacies? Because that's where the vulnerability is.
Yeah.
That's where the closeness comes. That's where when you become intimately vulnerable emotionally and verbally with your spouse, there's no other kind of intimacy that's going to that's going to trump that.
Right.
It's the most powerful word.
Absolutely. So here's a couple things that you can do.
Right.
Yeah. These are some exercises or questions that you can use to rebuild that emotional connection. You might ask a simple question. What do you need more of from me right now?
Yep. That's a great question.
You know,
right.
Or you've asked me this question before. When do you feel most loved by me?
Yeah.
You know, those are just simple questions. They open up the dialogue to create that emotional intimacy.
Now, the key to that is when you ask these questions and your spouse comes back with the answers, do not challenge them. Do not say that's stupid.
Absolutely.
You have to accept what they're saying and understand them and say, thank you for letting me know. I'll work on that.
Right. Yeah. And part of that, too, is creating a safe space for the vulnerability and honesty to happen. Because if you can't have any distractions, you got to have, and sometimes our bedroom is our safest, most holiest place in our home.
Yeah.
So that's always a safe space, at least for me. To have those vulnerable and honest conversations.
And it's to create that space, like Cathy said, you want to find a very comfortable, safe feeling space, like the bedroom is a very good
neutral
place.
For both of you.
Neutral for both of you, right? You discover that. You want to make sure your kids are asleep, right? You don't want your kids running and screaming when you're doing this. You need to remove all distractions, no TV, no phone, no nothing. It's just you want to sit down with your spouse and you want to listen to hear how they feel and what they are truly saying to you. Because when you listen with that kind of curiosity, then instead of coming back and snapping some kind of dumb statement, you can ask curious questions.
Right. You're present.
Tell me more about that. What do you mean by I need blah, 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 blah. Tell me more about that. I need to fully understand that.
Yeah.
So those are the important parts. Talking is not the best part of conversation.
No, it's the listening part. Yeah, that's really good. So we're going to talk a little bit now about rebuilding physical and spiritual intimacy because, we've got to get to the emotional intimacy first. And once we have the emotional intimacy by practicing these questions and sitting down and having these vulnerable, honest conversations, what do we have to do to rebuild the physical and spiritual intimacy? And I love this very first thought. That comes to my mind is reframing sex as a connection, not a performance. And I think for me, I want to speak, and I don't talk about this subject very much, but this really stands out to me, is that the world has created these, whether they be images, and I don't mean that in a vulgar way, but this idea that sex has to look a certain way and it has to be performed a certain way. And if it's not, then you're not doing it right, or people are going to judge you. It's not. It's really about connection. And I think that's what's changed for me is that image of what it's supposed to look like is no longer in my head. It's more about connecting with my spouse.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm going to jump into somewhere, and I'm going to say it. If you're watching pornography, you need to stop now.
That's the wrong image,
Because there's absolutely no connection with pornography and sex. It is all performance. That's all it is. Those people are getting paid lots of money. And there was I wish I could remember the name of the guy.
Yeah, I remember that.
It was on Sean Ryan's show. It was an ex-porn star, now become pastor, and he dug into the dark side of pornography. And I'm telling you, you do not want to go there.
Right.
And if you're a man watching it, it's gonna definitely, whether you want to believe it or not, it's going to interfere with the sexual life between you and your spouse. And even if it's a woman, I just talk more on a man's part. But
that's true. Where you connect
remember, it's not performance that counts. It's the vulnerable, intimate connection that counts.
That's beautiful. I love that. And then the other thing that I love too is the non-sexual touch. That builds that closeness. We talked about that. That's one of the things that we do is the hand holding, the rubbing of your knee, the rubbing of your back, the neck, things like that. Things that are going to build closeness is what we want to do. And they're non-sexual.
They're non-sexual. And Cathy's touch does so much for me, right? Just like she got her hand on my knee right now, and I just feel so at peace there, right?
Yeah.
Or, when we go out to places and we're sitting listening to somebody, or she puts her hand on my shoulder, those kind of things, or even driving, right? A
Yeah.
lot of times I'll reach over, and Cathy does a lot of driving. She doesn't trust me. I can't
I
sit
just
on it
like to
when-
drive.
she loves to drive,
I do
which
drive.
is okay.
Yeah.
But I'll rub her shoulder, right,
Yeah.
while she's driving, and she just absolutely loves it.
Yeah.
So
the
those
non-sexual
guys-
touch.
and this
Yeah.
is like when I pat you on the butt all the time. It's non-sexual,
Right.
right? I mean,
Yeah. And then another form of rebuilding that physical and spiritual intimacy, this is really valuable. Like you said earlier, we really need to get better at this, is praying together.
Right.
That's a form of spiritual
Yep.
intimacy. Sometimes it doesn't have to be a lot. It can just be sitting together, holding hands, and just bringing God into your presence.
Right.
But that will definitely help build your spiritual intimacy, not only as a couple, but your spiritual intimacy individually with God as well. And I think that's really important. And then the other thing we've been on this area too is dealing with mismatched sex drives.
Yes.
You know, with grace and communication. Yes. We are two individuals.
Right.
I would say we're mismatched.
To a certain degree, we become more matched because we've been able to have those conversations.
Right, but again, we were mismatched for many, many years. That has slowly over time improved, but that's because we talk about it. This is because we offer grace, and I feel safe today. That's another thing too. I feel much safer in our intimate relationship because you've allowed me that space. Yes. You've allowed me that opportunity to just be able to say, no, I'm not feeling it today.
Right.
You know, and you honor that.
Right.
So that's the grace and the communication.
That, and also in bed, you know, I want her to be comfortable, and I don't want her to do things that make her feel uncomfortable.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we have an understanding.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I trust, you know, I love her. I want her to trust me. I want her to have faith in me. And part of that is honoring her her love-making wishes. Right?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. So we're going to have a few exercises for you that we want to share, and a call to action. We're really loving these call to actions. So we're just going to ask you this week, spend 15 minutes this week talking about what intimacy means to you.
Right.
Sit down with your spouse, your partner, and talk about what intimacy means to you. And then we also have a worksheet that we would love to offer you if it's something you're interested in. It's called the Intimacy Inventory Worksheet.
And you can use that for your 15-minute conversation.
Yeah, exactly. So if that's something that you would like to see the worksheet, you can email us at healandrestorecounseling@gmail.com. We're not going to judge you just because we know who's asking for it. We're going to I'm going to cheer you on. Oh yeah, here we go. Somebody is interested in building their intimacy. So if you're interested in that intimacy inventory worksheet, please reach out to us at healandrestorecounseling@gmail.com. We'll email that to you and then use that for your 15-minute talk.
Yeah, and you just simply write in the body, we would like the 15-minute worksheet.
Right. And this is an opportunity where you get to share your own reflections as a couple.
Right.
So it's very, very important that we grow our intimate relationships.
And the reality of this is probably going to be the hardest thing you're going to do in your relationship, but it's going to be the best thing you do for your relationship.
Yeah.
It's really critical that you start having these very vulnerable and open, honest communications to build that true intimacy. After all, intimacy means into me you see.
Yeah, into me I see. Yeah, absolutely.
So
we're going to close this out with this thought. When you see intimacy as connection and not just sex, you create space for healing, passion, and oneness that last. And we can say that, that's an area we've had to work on, and it's lasting.
Yes. It's lasting. Yeah.
So as we close out this episode, as we do every week, we want to invite you to check out all of our books on Amazon. And we've kind of listed them all here for you. You can find them on our website as well, or you can go to Amazon and read the reviews and read a little bit about them. But the original Healing the Wounded Child Within that Randy wrote, it's about healing from the pain of abuse. That's available.
And that's also available in Spanish, English and Spanish.
And Spanish, yes, absolutely. Yeah. And then our few books that we put together here, they're very quick, easy, short reads to help build stronger relationships. The first one is How to Heal and Restore Your Marriage. That is a 4-step process.
Even if you think your marriage is on top, you can always use a little help.
Yeah, so that book, How to Heal and Restore Your Marriage, is a 4-step process to restore the most important relationship. Yeah. We have Renewing Bonds, which is 7 steps to restoring your relationship. And our most recent one that has been out for a couple of weeks now is Hearts Reunited. It's steps to restore love and intimacy, which is what we're talking about today. We also have, which has been a tremendous help to many, many couples, is the 30-day devotional to wholeness. And what this book does, it's 30 days. It's devotional. It's got some prompting questions. There's a few scriptures in there. It's a great read to do with your husband, your wife, your partner, and be able to have some open dialogue about the particular topic.
In fact, our life group,
we challenged them all.
We challenged them all to do it for 30 days, and they did do it, right? And every one of them that did it said this helped us tremendously.
Yeah, definitely. And the exciting one, drum roll.
Yeah.
It was just released this week. This is one that Randy's been working on, and it's called The Healing Path. It's a survivor's guide to healing from abuse. So it's kind of a follow-up to Healing the Wounded Child Within, but it's the healing part of what it took for Randy to get to that place of healing. So we encourage you, if it's something that you have struggled with, whether any form of abuse, that's a book for you. If you know a family member who has struggled from abuse, that would be a book for them too. And all of these books, as a reminder, can be found on our website at healingrestorecounseling.com. Also, as we close out, we are offering our 1-hour no-cost discovery session. And this is where we get to hear from you. You get to hear from us. We get an opportunity to share a little bit about ourselves. And we found this is one very successful way to build a relationship when we're starting a healing journey. So we invite you to go to our website. There's testimonials, there's letters, there's books, there's all kinds of information at healingrestorecounseling.com.
Yeah, we just added a letters and poems page.
Yes.
And it's letters and poems that they're anonymous, that people have written and sent to us, and they're pretty good.
Yeah, no, we're excited about that. So do check it out, and of course we're here for you to journey with you, whatever that looks like. So that's good, beautiful.
All right, so we'll see you all next week. I hope you enjoyed this session, and please pass it on.
Yeah, share
it, like it, subscribe, whatever you can to help us out.
Promote it,
and promote it for us.
Yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
And remember this: if nobody tells you they love you today, Randy does.
Cathy does.
And more importantly, God does.
God does.
Be blessed. Have a fabulous week.
Have a great week, everyone.
Bye bye.